No.
I did the Expedia story.
Yeah. It's like,
I just want to put it in Tech Alliance. I went to the Tech Alliance.
Yeah. See, I think this would be interesting. Let's just walk through your week. Everything you did.
Who the hell wants to know about my week?
Well, it also kind of touches about on the stories you did.
Honestly, of all the stories this week, it's probably not the biggest talker, but the fact that the head of Paul Allen's biggest surviving foundation left after 9 months. I mean, this is the foundation that's going to get the money from the Seahawks and the Blazers. I mean, they started with $3.1 billion. They're going to end up with like 15, 17, $20 billion in the end. And the person who was going to run it left after 9 months. They're funding AI too. They're funding the Allen Institute potentially too. I mean, that's like the most important story of the week. And
yeah, I don't know if people care.
Yeah, exactly.
I really don't. The Bruce Harrell story is a bit of a talker.
It is.
I think we could riff on that.
This could be a 3-hour.
But no one's listening anyway because it's Memorial Day weekend.
So let's just talk for as long as we want.
This is a good way to set it up, actually. Have you been recording this?
Yes, I'm recording right now.
I wasn't even buying the mic. But this would be a good way to start this. Is just say, no one's going to be listening because everyone's barbecuing their hot dogs and grilling their hamburgers. So,
did you say hamburgs?
Hamburgs.
Like
Hamburgs, like the city in Germany. Anyway, this will be the longest podcast ever.
All right, so I'll read the setup that I was going to read, and then we'll play this intro and
we'll see where it goes. Okay, I'm ready.
Hi, and welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop.
And I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook.
We are coming to you from Seattle, where we get to report each day on what's happening around us in business, technology, and innovation. What happens here matters everywhere, and every week on this show, we talk about some of the most interesting and important stories and trends in the news. John, thank you for doing the show today. I know you're a little bit under the weather.
I'm recovering.
This is the Anthony Fauci special GeekWire podcast with you sitting about 5 feet across the table from me unmasked. We'll see where I am in about 4 days.
Hopefully you don't get the bug.
This week on the GeekWire podcast, SpaceX files for what could be the largest IPO in history, and the S1, the IPO filing, reveals a key part of an economic bright spot in the Seattle region. Jeff Bezos goes on CNBC and calls out government incompetence and political posturing, and he pitches eliminating taxes for the bottom half of earners, and more to the point of the stuff we want to talk about, reveals new details about his AI company, Prometheus. John Cook goes to World Cup ticketing hell and discovers that ChatGPT and Gemini are better support agents than FIFA. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. I can't wait to talk about that. That'll be the extra hour of the show right there.
Plus a special Sam Altman Seattle Startup edition of GeekWire Trivia.
Can't wait.
Also, just a programming note in case you missed it, check out our special midweek episode with Brian Evergreen, the former Microsoft AI strategy lead and the author of Autonomous Transformation. Been getting good feedback on that episode, John.
Great.
Lots of people resonated with them. Also, coming up next week, my interview with Eric Ries, the lean startup author and founder of Long-Term Stock Exchange. He's got a new book, Incorruptible, and that's an interview that I recorded with him at Seattle Flow Startup Day on the sidelines there after we did the keynote session. But before we get into this week's show, John, I thought it might be good to take just a moment to remember two people that we lost this week in the Seattle tech, business, and media communities. Soma Cigar passed away on Tuesday at 59 years old. This was a shock to a lot of people in the community, very young. He spent 27 years at Microsoft. He led the developer division for over a decade, and he was one of the key people behind opensourcing.net. After Microsoft, he went to Madrona, the Seattle venture capital firm, invested in companies like Snowflake and UiPath and many others. He was a close friend of Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, and really everybody who knew Soma loved him. And I have to say, my favorite memory of Soma, I've covered him for so many years, but when he was back at Microsoft toward the end of his tenure, the open sourcing of .NET, he was so excited about that. He had me in over at the developer division offices. He could have gone on for hours about that being the future of Microsoft. And it was just such a hard right turn for them. It was so different than everything they'd done. And he was one of the driving forces behind that, just to open source their developer platform. And then a few weeks later, they had me back over, and he was really excited about the fact that they were going to an open floor plan in the developer division. And then he gave me a tour personally, the vice president in charge of the division giving you a tour of the office is not something that would normally happen at Microsoft. And I don't know, I just remember his enthusiasm and his upbeat approach. And you interacted with Soma over the years too.
Yeah, more so. I didn't know him in his Microsoft days,
Yeah.
but then certainly in his investment days at Madrona. And the thing that always struck me about Soma was he was really deeply interested.
Yes.
I mean, he would ask very penetrating, interesting questions to you. And I know both of us experienced this related to GeekWire as well, and our own business and how we were doing. And that's what really struck me. It wasn't surface level conversations with Soma. It was very in-depth and enlightening in many ways. And I mean, you just have to talk about his journey too, the immigrant's journey when you think about it, and his story of how he came to the US and, grew up in pretty extreme poverty and came to the US. And I love the story that you had in the obituary, Todd, about he was so uninformed about where he was coming into the United States that when he got his ticket, it was to LA.
As in Louisiana.
But he thought he was going to Los Angeles, and he arrived and he said, "Where are all the big buildings?" So it just shows this promise and energy of people. And I guess why I'm such a big believer on why we need to have this pool of immigrants coming into our country, because the impact that they can have is just tremendous. And so, yeah, it's just a huge loss, and our thoughts obviously go out to Soma's family and friends and the Madrona network as well. So, yeah, big loss for the community.
Madrona put out a great email and post just this afternoon before we started recording, and my favorite memory from that was Sabrina Albert, who's a partner at Madrona, and she shared the thing that Soma would ask at the end of every monthly one-on-one that they would have. And I remember him asking this, that we had coffee with him over somewhere, Kirkland or somewhere. Where did we go?
On the east side, yeah.
His question for her at the end of every one-on-one was, "Are you having fun?"
That's a good point. This is a point that we've made in our own business. And another entrepreneur who passed several years ago passed this advice on to us here at GeekWire, Richard Tate, who was also a former Microsoft executive and then went on to co-found Cranium. He passed on the advice, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Another passing this past week in this community was Anthony Bellante, the photographer for the Puget Sound Business Journal. He passed away Thursday at the age of 58 from complications following a stroke. He was just a fixture in the Seattle media scene. He was also a former U.S. Army National Guard colonel and Chinook helicopter pilot who served 30 years, including tours in Afghanistan. And my memory of Anthony, I didn't have a lot of interactions with him, but it really speaks to the fact that even just minor interactions with somebody of that kind of character can have an impact. I remember he was at the GeekWire Summit. They were covering it. And of course, we have outside media come in. And he was so genuinely grateful that we had lunch for everybody, including the media. And he came up to me and just said, hey, thank you. Thanks for making sure we had lunch today. It was most cynical media people would just take it for granted and take the lunch. He was not a cynical
media person. He was a joyous media person. And boy, what a light in any room he came into. And I mean, I loved Anthony because he was just such a special person in terms of just a light in a room. I think, gosh, he just always had a big smile on his face. Yes. And every time I interacted with him, I felt better. Even within seconds, you felt better. And there are few people in this world who have that effect.
Yeah. So our hearts go out to the families and the colleagues and the teammates and the friends of Soma and Anthony. And I think why don't we take a break and we'll come back and then we'll talk about the week's news. All right, welcome back. It's Todd Bishop with John Cook. John, Elon Musk gave us a gift this week.
An IPO filing?
300 and some odd pages.
Well, this company is like...
SpaceX.
It's like, 10 companies rolled into one.
It really
so
is.
It's not a surprise.
So the part that we pay a lot of attention to is Starlink, and that is because their manufacturing facilities, some of their engineering as well, are here in the Seattle area. And it's kind of this bright spot right now in the local economy. If you look at the space ventures and all of the different ways that commercial space, satellites, and all sorts of things related to that are fueling the economy. That was a big focus of the Technology Alliance luncheon that I went to this week. But for me, it was fascinating because we covered this, the beginnings of this. I don't know if you remember
this story.
Yes.
Yeah. Elon showed up in Seattle, right?
Yes.
Unexpectedly or kind of quietly. And didn't we just try to get in? And I just remember there was this hullabaloo around us having a reporter there. And we got some weird photo.
Through the glass.
Yeah,
it's kind of foreshadowed the shots that we took through the courtroom windows, courthouse windows.
We should have put those two together.
So that was back in January 2015. He held a private event at Seattle Center right under the Space Needle to announce SpaceX's satellite internet plans. I don't even think it was called Starlink at the point. And they tried to keep the media out. And we were able to get photos through the window and talk to people afterward as well. That was the beginnings of it. So looking back now, seeing what it's become, Starlink is really the financial fuel of these broader ambitions. And of course, the whole idea of SpaceX is to make humanity interplanetary. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. And it's really kind of a remarkable S1 because of that. But before I get to that, so Starlink has 10.3 million subscribers. That segment generated $11.4 billion in revenue last year and $4.4 billion in operating income. It's 61% of SpaceX's total revenue, well more than half.
And very profitable.
And very profitable, and it's the only segment that's turning a profit inside SpaceX.
Which surprises me because it is a very cost-intensive business, and they're expanding rapidly.
I wonder how they allocate the expenses, because you think about Starlink being able to take advantage of a lot of the launch services that they do as SpaceX, the Falcon 9 rockets, everything like that. I wonder how much of those expenses are allocated to Starlink versus the launch service. But anyway, so SpaceX is seeking up to $80 billion or more in the IPO, potentially the largest initial public offering ever, a valuation north of $2 trillion. And it claims the largest total addressable market in human history. $28.5 trillion.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me my unearly trivia question. You should have had me guess.
Yeah. So it's just a mammoth S1 filing, IPO filing. There's some little fun things in here. SpaceX and Tesla are co-developing an agentic AI platform called MacroHard, described as a capable, of course, a play on Microsoft. Elon's going to Elon, as Sam Altman once said. So yeah, the idea is that they're going to create fully emulating digital workflows, augmenting human operation of computers, a fully AI-operated software company, and it goes on. I mean, this S1 is like a novel.
This could be a 3-hour podcast just on this IPO filing.
Yes. So big picture, you've got SpaceX coming in and really potentially setting a new benchmark in the public markets and having an impact here in the Seattle area. As I said, that Tech Alliance lunch that I went to, I mean, you got Amazon Leo, you've got Blue Origin. This is kind of a glimmer of hope in an otherwise somewhat dire economic landscape right now.
I wouldn't say it's a dire economic landscape.
Well, this gets to the point of the column that you wrote this week, which is, people like me, doomers, need to stop.
In part, I think that's what I touched on. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you believe that AI is the next big revolution in technology and innovation, we have a lot of smart people that do that here. So what are people complaining about? I guess they say that they're not going to be here anymore and they're going to leave and they're going to do it elsewhere and this is a bad place to do it. But, I get it. Things are changing. The political environment's difficult. But there's still an immense amount of talent here. And we've spent 50 years or more importing some of the most brilliant minds in the world to be here. I mean, we mentioned Soma, our tribute to him. Perfect example. Brilliant minds have come to Seattle over the last 50 years, and they're here. And they're either investing, building, working at large companies. And that is such a huge, huge asset that if we don't take advantage of it as a region, we're squandering the opportunity.
But what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when the entrepreneurs who would have been here if not for the new taxes, or the companies that would have stayed here?
I thought you were going to say, what about in 5 or 10 years when there are no jobs left because it's just the one person or no person startup?
And the people who would have come in from other countries,
question.
Right? Also changing immigration policy as well.
That's true.
It's easy to be a doomer. It is easy to be a doomer right now.
That's true. The immigration policies across the board in this country. The tax policy is a whole nother discussion. You're going to make this a 6-hour podcast? Yes, those are going on. I would still argue. And Todd, I know we're going to talk about World Cup and soccer later, but there was a study that came out this week, and it ranks the host cities. You know the World Cup's coming up starting in June.
Really?
Do you know what
You're
the World
kidding.
Cup is?
You're kidding.
I know you hate soccer. But anyway, they rank the top
You want to
cities.
quiz me? You want to quiz me? Go ahead.
No, because you know what the answer is. Oh, actually, I will quiz you. They rank the top cities in North America in order to watch a match. And they factored in things like beer prices, hotel density, transportation options, walkability, all these factors, heat, weather.
Whether it's too hot or too cold?
Well, Dallas and Miami.
Right. Okay, I got you.
Some of these places are going to be intolerable.
Yes.
It's going to be miserable in these places. Guess what the number one city was?
Not Seattle. Seattle was number 3.
You did see the study. Oh, you saw this. That's right.
I can't remember what number 1 was.
I think it was telling. Vancouver, BC is number 1.
Yes.
Toronto was 2. And Seattle was 3. Then there were like 2 Mexican cities.
Wow.
So when people complain about Seattle, look up how amazing it is. And then we hear a float plane going over here, heading up to the San Juan Islands on a beautiful 70-degree day with no bugs and no humidity.
Someday we're going to get that Kenmore Air sponsorship.
That's right. Come on, Kenmore Air. It's time to jump on board. It's just we lose sight of how amazing this place is. And that's not only the natural beauty and the sports atmosphere and the culture. It is the business community and the amount of talent we have here. It's impressive. Now, some would say that's at risk, and that is a fair point. But I would just say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as it relates to Seattle.
You say that every week.
Is that becoming my tagline?
That's your phrase.
Oh, boy.
You've said that for years.
All right.
Okay.
Anyway, we got totally sidetracked.
No, that's good. So speaking of tax policy and everything, Jeff Bezos was on CNBC this past week. Should we take another break and then come to that? Because I think that gets into these larger issues. I mean, he was in some ways the trendsetter. He was the first one to run away from Seattle to Miami, right?
Enjoy those bugs.
All right. We'll get into that after this. All right, welcome back. It's Todd and John. John, you were just saying we didn't even talk about the main point of your column.
Yeah, the main point of my column, and it was called Seattle, We've Got an Image Problem. It was, we've seen these national headlines, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, talking about how Seattle has really turned its back on the business community. And my point in the column was that's a real problem. That narrative starts to stick. And I talked to the chairman of a very prominent, iconic organization here in the Seattle area, not a tech company, who told me this week they're having a problem recruiting from outside the Seattle area for a CEO role, in part because they're unsure what this place is like. You know, they've seen the reports about how, you know, from 5 or 6 years, Seattle's on fire and this terrible place to live. And then you have these stories in the national media about how Seattle's this really unfriendly place for business. And like that narrative, if it takes root, can have a real negative impact. And so I think we need to, as I was talking about in the previous segment, there's so many amazing assets here. If we're not out there touting and talking about the amazing stuff that is also going on, now every place has its problems, but like, boy, I still want to live here. I still want to build a business here. I still think it's a great place to grow a business. So that was more of the point of the column, is that we better get our crap together here and reverse that narrative, because that is something that could really snowball and have a really tremendous negative impact on Seattle.
One of the most interesting stories of this past week was by our colleague Lisa Stifler, who went to a Bellevue Chamber of Commerce event, and they had people from Seattle there talking to the people in Bellevue about...
Which we should say for the non-Seattle listeners, it's the city on the other side of Lake Washington, yes. About 8 miles away from Seattle.
Yes, not a suburb. A city.
It's a true city.
It's a true city. My favorite quote out of that was John Scholes, the head of the Downtown Seattle Association, was on the panel, and he said, I don't think I was invited here back in 2017 or 18 when Amazon jobs were falling out of the sky in downtown Seattle, and we had 79 cranes in the air to talk about the good times. So it's interesting how that image plays.
It's dumb that the two cities even have to compete, and that we compete even politically, which is actually what's happening. But
another city that was in the news this past week was New York because of Jeff Bezos' comments on CNBC. John, I set my alarm for this one. I knew that he was going to be on CNBC.
An hour interview.
It was an hour-long interview. And in fact, they got like 40 minutes in, and Andrew Ross Sorkin said, okay, I think it's time to take a break. I couldn't tell if it went off the rails or if they had intended to talk all along about economic policy and wealth inequality.
Did it? Now, I've watched clips. I haven't watched it from front to end.
Yeah.
Did it start on the wealth
Yes.
gap? Because, okay, that's good to know, because my initial reaction, because I watched that clip, it's about a 6-minute clip, I was like, whoa, Bezos was caught off guard. He was. He really struggled. He struggled with that question at first. I thought he managed it well as he got into it and got thinking and got rolling, but I think he was surprised by the question and that the interview started that way.
Okay, so the interview, as we said, kicked off with Andrew Ross Sorkin asking about the wave of headlines targeting billionaires and wealth inequality. It seemed like Bezos had given this some thought. He said he had a policy idea: eliminate federal income taxes for the bottom half of earners, arguing that they only account for 3% of revenue. And his recurring example was a nurse in Queens making $75,000 a year who pays more than $12,000 in taxes. He said Washington should be sending her an apology, not a tax bill. And his overall theme was one of incompetence in government. That was basically what he was getting at. So let's hear more on that.
We actually have a spending problem, and that's a skills issue. I mean, let me give you an example. The New York City school system.
Right.
They spend $44,000 per student. $44,000. That's 30% more per student than other big cities like Chicago, right, LA, and Boston. And it's 3 times more than Miami and Houston. And by the way, New York City doesn't get better outcomes.
But
so listen, let me just say, if we ran Amazon the way New York City runs their school system,
right,
your packages would take 6 weeks to arrive. We'd have to charge you a $100 delivery fee, and then when the package did finally arrive, it'd have the wrong item in it anyway.
Right.
We can't. That's a skills issue, Andrew. It's not about. It's just competence.
It's interesting because at first when he was saying skills issue, I was thinking of it in the more traditional political sense and economic sense of workforce retraining. But that's not what he's saying there. He's saying these people are incompetent. That is fundamentally what he's saying.
True. And then later in the interview, he talks about how Trump has kind of mellowed and he kind of acquiesced to Trump. And I was like, well, if the government's so incompetent and you've had Trump serving his second term, it just doesn't match up.
Also, comparing Amazon's ability to execute its business strategy versus the complexity of government is not an apples to apples comparison.
Correct.
You're dealing with revenue in the form of taxes, you can't choose which constituents you're going to be serving, as much like Amazon can have a selected base of customers, even though it might be self-selected. The comparison, the analogy...
they can shut down their Fire phone and not be in the mobile phone business anymore.
Right. The New York City government cannot choose to no longer pick up your trash, much as Amazon can stop.
Or not serve a certain type of student.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other difference is I have not looked in detail at the economics of Houston or Miami, which were the examples he cited, versus New York, but certainly the cost of living in New York is vastly higher than most other places. That affects teacher salaries. I mean...
Yeah, why just pick on New York versus look at it as a systemic, larger national issue?
I think because it has a socialist mayor. I think that's the reason. And that's the reason Andrew Ross Sorkin was bringing him up. And it just
because
went on.
I wouldn't think, there are a lot of government agencies, city, state, local, federal, that are operating ineffectively. So if that was the point, that most government agencies are ineffective, then that probably would resonate a bit more.
Well, also Zoran Mondami, the New York City mayor, has gone after these, is it pied-à-terre? Is that how you say it? The taxes for people who basically just have vacation homes in the form of condos. And he singled out one of those people. And Bezos said, that's really not fair to villainize somebody who's done a lot of good for New York. And so there's just a lot of back and forth between them. For our discussion, I was just fascinated by the number of times he kept bringing up Amazon as a comparison. And there was more.
Yeah, because you'd think he'd kind of sailed away from his Amazon years, right?
In some ways, yes. But here's another one. This was a question about the villainization of billionaires by politicians.
It is an effective political technique. It's as old as the hills.
Right.
So when you don't know how to solve a problem, create a villain, blame them. But it won't solve the problem. The only thing that will solve the problem is skill.
Right.
And so really it's a skills issue. You want to say that any corporate CFO worth their salt, the Amazon CFO could find 3% in the federal budget on a Tuesday afternoon. There is so much waste in government spending.
That surprised me, in part because I can envision the people at the Day One Tower, where I know Jeff Bezos still occasionally visits for board meetings and high-level strategy meetings, including Brian Olsavsky, the Amazon CFO. I cannot imagine he was pleased by that comment, because that is kind of a bit of a challenge, to say our CFO could figure this out. Again, underestimating or at least understating the complexity of the issues. And it was a little bit tone deaf, I thought.
Well, it's also what Steve Ballmer, the former Microsoft CEO, tries to do through his initiative.
USA Facts.
USA Facts, in many ways.
Well, his is more about informing, shining a light, and empowering people with information. Ballmer is very specifically not saying, I've got the answer.
True, but I think he would come to the same conclusions that Bezos is on many of these things, that would be pointing out some of the waste that's going on across various organizations and using real data and facts to back it up.
Yes, but USA Facts is not that. It's more about informing and enlightening, and Ballmer may have those positions personally, but I can tell you, you cannot get him to state them publicly like you could here with Jeff Bezos. And so to me, that was an interesting part of this interview, was just the number of times he kept bringing up Amazon.
Well, there is this notion amongst business people, their diagram for how the world works is how business works. And the public sector, as we were talking about earlier, works it's not a business. And so you can't necessarily apply the same lessons to it that you can a government.
On this last clip, it is important right off the bat to point out Jeff Bezos is a philanthropist. He gives away a lot of money. He funds homeless shelters for women and families. So just with that in mind, listen to this.
But I want to make one more point here, which I think is really important. Even though I'm going to give away the majority of my wealth, if I do my job right, the value to society and civilization from my for-profit companies will be much, much larger than the good that I do with my charitable giving.
Where have you heard that before?
Well, I've heard him echo
that
those.
That was Amazon's mantra
Yeah.
in much of the
2000s.
Seattle.
Yes.
in Seattle. That was why Amazon was not back then. Now they've changed this, but back then during Jeff Bezos' heyday, they would say, our contributions are not philanthropy. They are for the good of society through our commercial activities.
And there's some truth to it. And I don't want to deny the fact that jobs and the power of a company like Amazon can have a tremendous impact. My point all along, even during the parts when Amazon was taking that stance throughout its massive growth of transformation as a company and as a city here, the two were not communicating and connected, and they were operating on different planets. And as a result of that, we kind of got a broken system.
Yeah.
And I think there's another way. I think you can do both. Well, I guess you can do all three. You can do the philanthropic stuff, you can do the business stuff, but I do think there's another special band that needs to be between the public sector and business. And it's an old school way of thinking about it, that the companies that are headquartered in a certain place have a certain responsibility to the communities in which they grew up. And that was really broken in Seattle and is still broken. Now, can we mend that back together? Can we get some civic pride together and bring those worlds together? I hope so, because you do need another component of it. You can't just have the libertarian, or maybe you can. We'll see what happens. The libertarian, business is great. We're just going to create jobs and we're going to do whatever we want and grow at all costs without any connection points to the schools, the roads, the fire departments, the police departments. Now, you could say that's funneling money into those systems, and it is. I just think needs to be another layer that brings those communities together, has those two groups talking, and at least working in some sort of path towards a future together. And that's what was broken in Seattle. Now, you do see that more with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I would say that's a more successful relationship.
Microsoft and the region.
Microsoft and the region.
And the state.
And yeah. And I think, now it's not perfect, but it seems to work a little bit better.
One last thing here, just in the realm of reporting and interviewing. You mentioned earlier that you thought Jeff Bezos was surprised by some of this line of questioning. Maybe so. But ultimately, I think he was the one who controlled this interview.
Well, I thought he recovered well. I thought he was surprised by the way it started. But actually, the fact that he just was able to rattle off the 3% and the nurse in Queens, and like he was either prepped or...
I think he had some inkling that this was going to happen.
So I thought he actually got there and did a nice job of answering it once he got to his place. And frankly, it was a good interview because... we're talking about it here. We got some additional insights into how he thinks, and he's got an amazing amount of power.
One last thing here that was a little newsy. He revealed more about Prometheus, which is his new AI company. Many people assumed, based on the initial reporting, that this was a physical AI robotics company. And Andrew Ross Sorkin said, hey, this is your AI robotics company. And he said specifically, Bezos did, no, this is not an AI robotics company. He said they're creating an artificial general engineer for designing physical objects, kind of like a next generation computer aided design tool or CAD tool. So we got some insights into what he's doing. And this is notable in part because he's not just investing in this company, Prometheus. Jeff Bezos is the co-CEO. I mean, this is something where he's signaling that this is going to be a big deal. But that was another interesting tidbit out of that story. Okay, let's stop there.
Are we going to have 6 breaks in this podcast?
Perhaps. Let's take one more break, and I want to talk about your World Cup ticket nightmare next. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop and John Cook. So, John, you slacked me at like 3 a.m. on Wednesday. I was like, I didn't even have time to look at this. What were you ranting about the World Cup and your ticket experience?
Well, first off, I've been lucky enough through cobbling together various means to get tickets to all 6 matches that are being played.
You're
in
kidding
Seattle.
me.
Yes. So I'm going to be gone a few days.
Well, I'm not surprised, actually.
So it's come together. And I haven't had to, it's FIFA. So I'm paying like an astronomical amount of money. It's ridiculous. We were speaking about Mamdani earlier this week, the mayor of New York, one of the greatest things he's ever done in my mind was he negotiated with FIFA, which is this cartel, basically to get 1,000 tickets for New Yorkers, regular New Yorkers, to go to World Cup games priced at $50.
Nice.
And you have to enter a lottery to get it.
Katie Wilson didn't do that for us?
Why? I mean, if you wanted to be beloved in your city by your constituents, you got to do stuff like that. That would be smart. I don't think she thought of that idea, but that would be a smart thing to do.
So how much for $50?
For $50.
So your tickets are not costing...
Mine are above that. And so not too crazy, but I mean, it's once in a lifetime opportunity to see some soccer. Now, FIFA has been criticized on all sorts of ways as it relates to ticketing, not only pricing, which is ridiculous, but the way they've rolled this out, the way they've done dynamic pricing, just the structure of it is bizarre. And so I got stuck in FIFA ticketing hell for about 4 hours because I was like I had a friend who had got me tickets to a match and he had transferred them to me. I accepted those tickets on my laptop into my FIFA account. Little did I know that I did not have the country code, which is +1 for US, attached to my mobile phone number. And nor did FIFA ever notify me that I needed that in order to get the tickets from there to my mobile device, which you need in order to get into the match.
Oh my goodness.
And so I spent at least 4 hours troubleshooting this. Of course, FIFA's FAQ was terrible and gave no information. So I started digging around and I was like, okay,
AI.
I'm going to go to my best friend, Gemini and ChatGPT. And I got to say, it was an interesting exercise to go through it because it really does change the way you think about technical support and how you deal with a challenging problem. I was just walking through the system and I was taking screen grabs of everything and saying, here's what I'm seeing. I'm uploading this. I got this error message, all of this stuff. I was betting against Gemini. I said, what do you think the odds are that when you give me this solution, that those tickets are going to be in my mobile wallet? And they're like, I'm 95% sure this is going to happen. And I was like, you're full of it. I was like, there's less than 10% chance. I said, you owe me a beer if they're not there. Go through the process. They're not there. And so eventually I filled out a customer support ticket with FIFA and told them that there's this syncing issue and they have a bug in their system that the two systems aren't communicating properly. And as of this week, the mobile ticket arrived. After my customer support inquiry, it arrived the next day. And now I have the ticket in my mobile wallet.
Now, did Gemini suggest that customer support?
Yes, all along. And it also was suggesting, and this is something I absolutely did not want to do, which was, I have the ticket receipt that I know it's owned. On game day, go to the ticket window and go and present this. And there is no way in hell I'm going to be spending my time on the day of the World Cup match going to the customer support line to figure this out. I want those tickets in my mobile wallet now. Now, the unfortunate thing is they're still in my FIFA wallet, essentially, because I'm not able to move them yet into my Apple wallet, which is where I really want them. But I assume that will happen closer to game day.
Couldn't you just open the FIFA app when you go through?
You could, but I don't want anything to do with being in
your
system.
You want nothing between you and the World Cup.
I want this in a trusted system that I know that the ticket will work in the system that I know.
Here's my theory. I don't know the answer to this, but my theory is that the system underlying the FIFA process is Ticketmaster.
I don't think so. No? I think it's its own thing.
Because I've had this problem with Ticketmaster specifically.
I've dealt with Ticketmaster a lot, and I think they have their own system.
Their own screwed up system.
I mean, we should...
Separate from the screwed up Ticketmaster
We should ask...
system.
I should get back into my chat with Gemini and ask that. Yeah, it speaks to this idea of this should be a pretty easy thing right now, that you order a ticket or you get a ticket transferred to you. It's in one's system and you should be able to get
this should not be an issue that you're dealing with in 2026.
It should not be an issue I'm dealing with in 2026. And it did literally take about 4 hours of work. And so then at one point I was getting frustrated and I asked Gemini, I was like, hey, my hourly bill rate is about $400 an hour. So I want you to drop a lawsuit for me to file against FIFA to get my money recouped on that. What do you think of this idea? I was just playing around. And it did. It was like, I think that's a bad idea. You know, you're not going to win and your time's more valuable. But here's a suit that you can send over to the proper folks.
All right. Well, congratulations on finally getting your ticket at least onto your phone in some form. Sounds like you're going to be okay.
I'm going to be okay.
Thanks, Gemini.
Yeah, first class problems here.
All right. Okay. You ready for
trivia?
Yeah.
Well,
you got more to say?
I do, because there were two other stories that I just really enjoyed this week on GeekWire.
Oh, really?
Yes. One relates to soccer. There's a company in Seattle called Temporal.
Yes.
You know this company?
Yes, I saw the story.
Yeah, they have about a $5 billion valuation. Yeah. But developer tools, not really that.
Wait, a 5B or?
$5 billion. Yeah. It's a startup, though. It's a privately held company. They are going to be the jersey sponsors on English Premier League soccer club Crystal Palace in South London. I just love this story just because
the
Seattle connections to an English Premier League club, I think is pretty cool.
Is English Premier League big?
It's pretty big. Yeah, it's pretty big.
I got to tell you, so I was...
You know who won? I'll quiz you. You know who won the title this season?
Oh, shoot. I should know this because the guy who hosts the Tech Brew Ride Home podcast was talking about it. Arsenal.
Hey!
How's that? How's that? No AI required. And I should tell you, so I was doing a proofread on the newsletter this week. Here's what Claude flagged. What was the name of the team again?
Crystal Palace.
Yeah. Kurt initially had in the text that Crystal Palace was a legendary English Premier League soccer team. And Claude said to me, you might want to rethink that. Legendary is a judgment call. Crystal Palace is a well-established club, but not typically described that way. They've never won a top-flight title. Consider long-standing or storied.
They won the FA Cup recently.
So you would consider that so this is maybe an example of Claude being outdated in terms of its database.
So I mean,
legendary.
It depends how you describe legendary. They're legendary in that they're really old and they have a very passionate fan base.
Okay.
So anyway, I thought it was cool to see a Seattle connection.
Okay, so that's one story.
Yes, the other was we talked about our current Seattle mayor, Katie Wilson, earlier. Well, our former Seattle mayor, Bruce Harrell, has a new job. And you know what it is, right?
Yes, startup CEO.
He's a startup CEO.
What was this company again that he's running?
Yeah, it's a company that does technology related to the fashion industry.
This was a surprise.
I thought it very surprising. Yeah.
We were talking about Bezos earlier. Talk about a tough interview. You've experienced this directly. Bruce Harrell spoke at the 2022 GeekWire Summit. And first off, let's just talk about this. First off, he kind of tries before the interview starts to kind of intimidate you. He does this kind of weird.
He's a former linebacker for the University of Washington.
He did this kind of weird jock bro-ish thing where he was like, he wanted you to know, John, you as the interview, that he was in charge.
It's true. And as we were talking about kind of journalistic interview techniques, and this is a style, like I do try to have a little bit of fun up there and a little playful, like start with something a little offbeat.
Yeah.
And I even told him, I was like, hey, I'm going to throw you just kind of a softball just to start it, warm it up, and talk about, and maybe it was even something like lessons from the UW gridiron that you've applied to being mayor, something simple. And he's like, you can ask that, but I'm not going to answer it. I was like, okay. So maybe I should have done the Andrew Ross Sorkin approach and just throw him a massive curveball right at the beginning. Right off the bat. So it's...
At any rate. But then the problem was, like, we had a 10-minute segment set with him at the summit. And if I remember right, his first answer was about 10 minutes.
Yes. Well, that's typical politician. But yeah, the company is called Filium.
Yeah, get us back on
point. It's a Seattle-based sustainable textile company.
Filium. I talked over you there.
Yeah.
Filium.
Yeah, founded in 2015. And they're making technology allows natural fabrics to repel odors, stains, and liquids. I mean, sounds pretty cool. But it's just talk about a curveball in terms of your career.
Do we know how he ended up there?
I don't. I think we should follow up and do an interview.
What the heck are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting interview, and maybe he will tell us. I don't want to talk about that. I don't know, but we should do an interview.
All right, let's do trivia after this.
Right. Pop quiz, hotshot.
This is GeekWire's Trivia Challenge.
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
All right, welcome back. Yes, it is that time, GeekWire Trivia. John, I have a hunch that you are going to know the answer to this right off the bat. So perhaps
I hope so. I've been bad lately.
You could pause a bit when we get to this, but I've got a little bit of a build-up. Of course, the big topic last week was the OpenAI Elon Musk lawsuit, and that turned into the biggest anticlimactic outcome ever on Monday morning when the jury came back and decided that the statute of limitations...
Why couldn't they have just decided that in the first hour?
Why couldn't the judge...
Yeah.
Well, they did in terms of the deliberations.
They
it only
did,
took them less than
but
an hour, less than 2 hours.
They could have saved some taxpayer dollars if they just said, I'm going to throw this out. Couldn't the judge have done that?
Done that? Yeah. Why? Well, the issue was, not to go down this rabbit hole, but the issue was the facts of the case as applied to the law, the statute of limitations. That was the question. Like, where did the clock start? And it was determined.
But they needed 3 weeks to figure that out.
Yeah, maybe they could have done probably.
Let's have a legal. I know we have a lot of legal experts.
A lot of lawyers. They're known as lawyers.
One of you lawyers out there, you're probably stuck in traffic coming back from
tell
Wenatchee or Cle Elum right now.
Explain to us why they couldn't have done this more efficiently and figured out this technicality.
I want one lawyer or multiple lawyers to come back and give us some theories on why they couldn't have figured that out.
So I do want to say I called it in terms of Microsoft. I had a hunch this was going to be the case in terms of Microsoft, that the jury would determine.
You called it.
Yeah, I called that. Yeah. I thought that they would actually come back with a finding that OpenAI had breached the charitable trust, at least. I thought that they were going to get further than that on OpenAI. But at any rate, the thing that made me think of this week was Sam Altman came up in a different context. That was in the story that I did about the 30th anniversary of Expedia. And Sam Altman was actually on the Expedia board from 2019 to 2023. And Barry Diller credits this. Barry Diller is the chairman of Expedia. He's the media mogul known for all sorts of iconic media brands, IAC Interactive, Paramount. Barry Diller, who's the chairman of Expedia, he credits Sam Altman's early demo of ChatGPT to an internal IAC meeting for Expedia being ahead of the curve in AI. But I actually looked back, John. Barry Diller, back in 2016 when I talked to him, I got a chance to talk to him at the Expedia 20th anniversary.
You mean
in
Mr.
Melbourne.
Diller?
I was just going to say.
I know you love this story. You love this story.
I was told before I interviewed him, do not call him Barry. Call him Mr. Diller.
Oh, boy.
So at any rate, Mr. Diller told me at the time, I asked him, I said, you're really big on AI. You're a proponent and a believer in its future.
What year was this?
This was 26. What is the year now? 2016. This
you
was
asked this in 2016?
Yes. Well, the same person who told me to call him Mr. Diller said, you should ask him about AI.
So 10
He's really
years
into
ago.
it.
Wow.
That's my point.
That's amazing.
This is 10 years ago, and here's what he said.
We should just do this as a separate story on GeekWire.
He said, you're a proponent. I said, you're a proponent and a believer in its future. And he said, well, how could you not be? You'd be an idiot not to be. Look, artificial intelligence is magic in its ability to change so much of what we all do. 2016.
That's pretty cool.
There were people in the industry who wouldn't have said that.
You could argue that it's not cool because it's AI, and some people would probably say that. But it's pretty.
Well, many people.
Yeah,
If you look at public, you look
at public
Holy
opinion,
cow,
they would probably
geez.
not say it cool. I guess what I would like to say is, it's pretty compelling that he was making that statement in 2016.
Yes. So as we approach the hour mark here on this week's show, here is the trivia question. While reporting on Expedia's 30th anniversary this week, we were reminded that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman served on the Expedia Group board from 2019 to 2023. But that is really far from his only connection to the Seattle technology scene. Very circuitous trivia question this week.
Yeah, cool.
Altman has personally invested in several companies in the region. In fact, it's really quite remarkable, all of his connections to Seattle, from Expedia to Microsoft to a bunch of startups. So the question is, Which of the following Seattle area startups is not one that Sam Altman has invested in?
Okay.
You're going to know the answer, I think.
I know off the top of my head at least a couple.
A, Helion Energy, the Everett-based fusion energy company. B, Brink, the Seattle-based public safety drone maker. C, Stoke Space, the Kent-based reusable rocket company. Or D, TerraPower, the next generation nuclear technology company. Do you know which one it is?
I think I've narrowed it down.
Yeah, because you know the three.
Yes, I've narrowed it down. I think I've got it.
Okay. So again, just for folks out there, it's A, Helion, B, Brink, C, Stoke Space, or D, TerraPower.
Well, I think that TerraPower is the correct answer because it's largely backed by Bill Gates.
It's backed by Bill Gates. That's right. And Sam Altman actually has an investment in, I think it's called Oklo, the nuclear fission startup that's based down in the Bay Area. So it's kind of a competing technology. But it just struck me in looking at this, like he's got so many connections to the Seattle area when you look at all of these different companies that he's involved in. So
good one, Todd.
Hey, there we go. All right. So that was perhaps our longest episode ever. We'll see how long it is after we edit out all the crap.
Well, people are commuting back from their long weekends, and hopefully they're enjoying a longer episode of the GeekWire podcast.
That's right. If you're out on a long walk because you've got time on Memorial Day, you're welcome.
Yes. Go a few extra steps.
Have a great Memorial Day weekend. I'm Todd Bishop.
And I'm John Cook.
We'll talk to you next week on the GeekWire podcast.